Welcome to Phails. My name is Philip Jones, and today I'm joined by Sara Ness. She's chief catalyst at Authentic Revolution, as well as an advisor to social health organizations such as Seek Healing and Rethink Wellbeing. Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah. You want to wave to everybody? They live in these cameras.
Hi, folks.
Now we take a couple deep breaths and then talk about your life story. Where were you born?
I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the city.
Yeah. Well, I was actually born in Philadelphia, but I grew up in Pittsburgh.
You were born in, what had you in Philadelphia?
My parents had jobs. Well, no. Yeah, my parents had jobs in Philadelphia, and then they moved to Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have any memories from the place where you were born? All your
Not
memories
really
came from...
Philadelphia. I think we were I was maybe 2 or 3 when we moved at oldest.
What was the family dynamic like?
I have a brother, and then my parents, and my parents didn't get along very much, and me and my brother didn't get along very much. So it was kind of a contentious household.
Your brother was older or younger?
He's older. He's a year and a half older.
Didn't get along very much. What's that?
No. He teased me pretty ruthlessly, and I think I kind of provoked him, says my mom at least. I don't remember super well of that time. He started going to boarding school when I entered middle school, in part because we had so much friction that my parents were worried about it.
Mm-hmm.
And in part just because he was not doing well at home. He took my parents fighting a lot worse than I did because I just had fantasy books I didn't even notice. I was the chronic mediator too. I was always trying to conciliate between my parents, going from one to the other, shuttling messages, trying to calm them down.
Really? From a young age?
Yeah.
What was parental fighting like?
Gosh. They would have something that set them off. They would argue with each other, and then my dad would kind of give my mom the silent treatment for days at a time.
Stonewalling,
yeah, absolutely. There was a very kind of complicated status dynamic. There was a bunch of things that paid into it, and my mom and I have a really close relationship now, can talk about just about anything, including stuff that parents and kids usually don't. My dad passed away about 9 months ago. My dad was autistic and was quite overwhelmed, I think, by having kids in the house. It's a lot of sound and stimulation. So I think he was just constantly triggered, which I have a lot of compassion for now. And he also had a kind of brittle ego. He couldn't really stand feedback. He would get angry really easily. And I think he felt kind of constantly shown up because in a lot of ways, my mom was more successful than him. My mom is a superstar in her career. She's won the Lifetime Award for epidemiology from a couple different institutes. She was on the board, I think, of, or at least has done consulting for the National Institutes of Health. She's was the dean of the School of Public Health at UT in Houston. Now she's an expert witness for the Johnson & Johnson cases against talc and baby powder and Tylenol leading to autism and stuff like that.
She was a rock star in the medical community.
Absolute rock star.
And your dad's in that same field?
My dad is a psychiatrist, or was a psychiatrist, and kind of went from job to job. Wasn't unsuccessful specifically, especially later in life. I think he really was quite good at what he did, but definitely was not as successful as my mom.
Yeah.
But my mom tried to be a super, super good mom and take care of everything in the household and us, and also lead this career. My dad kind of didn't help a lot. It was a pretty traditional relationship. So I think it was just there was a lot of status confusion. There was a lot of resentment. And it just felt generally an unhealthy environment, and it couldn't really be talked about. There was no hey, let's sit down and discuss that these are patterns that are happening.
So it would manifest in these fights.
Yeah.
But what was underlying it was some of this status stuff,
I
and
think
maybe
there was a
some
lot of dynamics.
resentment or some jealousy or envy or...
Probably, yeah. I think that was part of it, yeah. And
Maybe being the man and wanting to be the
uh-huh.
primary breadwinner. Like that was back in the day where maybe if a woman made more money than the man, it could have had some kind of
I think so, yeah. And
thorn in their paw.
I have a sense that that was partially feeding into it, that my dad just felt like emasculated in some ways. Like he had a big thing around disrespect. Like he'd constantly tell us that we were being disrespectful, even for things that like interrupting was hugely disrespectful for him. And it's like interrupting is kind of normal in conversational turn taking, but for him it was just like a no-go, and he had very clear views on reality, and you couldn't really shake them. They were truth. Um, and so a lot of arguing, like family trips would just be a disaster. Me and my brother would fight like cats and dogs. My parents would fight. Everyone would fight with each other. Um, but they tried their best to also find ways to love us. Like my mom was quite affectionate. They were both really supportive of our schooling. They gave us all our basic needs. My dad and I connected in a lot of really special ways intellectually. He taught me binary when I was quite young. We wrote poems to each other from the time I was like
Mm,
13 years old until just a couple years ago. I've got like
yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of poems that we wrote to each other.
Really?
Yeah. I actually, when he died, I put out like a little informal book of poetry that we'd written to each other.
Nice.
We read them to him when he was dying.
Mm. Did your
Um,
parents get divorced?
they eventually did several years after we moved out of the house. Actually, it was a funny story. I took my mom to Burning Man. She came back. She decided to divorce my dad. um, yeah. Uh, and strangely, getting divorced was the catalyst for them changing their relationship. My dad saw a bunch of ways that he'd been letting his anger rule. He realized how important my mom was to him. Like, he didn't have friends at all, basically. I think when he died, he had one friend that he talked to once a week on the phone. Um, my mom was his everything.
Mm.
So he really changed the way he was interacting. And for the first time, the two of them really started looking at and talking about their relationship, which I like to think that like teaching them authentic relating and being around them in it maybe had some effect on. My dad actually went through a bunch of our trainings.
Really?
They showed up at some of our retreats.
No way. Your folks did?
Yeah. God, there was such a funny moment, and I'm always going to get these wrong because I get these two confused with each other. But they came to an authentic relating retreat, so like big room full of like 60 people. I wasn't facilitating the opening circle. My parents are sitting like just to the left of the facilitators, sitting together, and facilitator. One of them is like the first one is like, okay, we're going to go around. Everyone is going to say their name and their pronouns, and where they're from. I think mom raises her hand, or dad, I can't remember which, and goes, can you explain what a pronoun is? So the facilitator does the whole explanation of what a pronoun is and the difference between like pronouns that you were assigned at birth and pronouns that you choose. Cool. So first facilitator goes, says, I'm so and so, here are my pronouns. Second facilitator goes, so and so, here are my pronouns. Dad, David Ness, XY. Mom, Roberta Ness, XX. Like they just named their chromosomes. And they totally understood the prompt. I might have gotten those
They were
chromosomes
being a little
switched.
snarky.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I probably am forgetting which chromosome is which. 50-50 chance I get that wrong every time. But yeah, they were totally being snarky, and they were just like, so they had this like vast intellectual humor, and that's really where they connected, is they were intellectual best friends.
Yeah.
So after they got divorced, my dad really changed. My mom kind of also started looking at their dynamic, realized where she'd contributed. They became closer than they'd ever been in their marriage.
Really?
For the last like 10 years of their life together, they were like this. They were peas in a pod. They spent most of their time together. When my dad
Oh.
started developing dementia, my mom took care of him. My dad decided to take his own life when the dementia got advanced enough,
Mm.
instead of like losing his mind slowly, which is incredibly brave, I think. And we
Yeah.
were with him the whole time. He stopped eating and drinking, which is the only legal way you can do it in Texas, which
Yeah.
sucks. But my mom now started a whole foundation to help people make end of life choices.
She could talk to a good friend of mine who's been advocating for that. Just recently went on Dr. Phil and has been kind of out in the media because his daughter
Really?
passed away, and she wanted to pass away in her own way, and they were in New York and she wasn't allowed to, so it was a different type of story.
That would actually, I'm sure she'd love that
I could put them
connection. That
together.
would be
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's doing wonderful work. She created this AI that you can talk to, like you can call into, and it'll have a conversation with you and it sounds like a human. And at the end of it, it will send you a legal living will document that you can share for your end of life wishes.
Wow.
It's wonderful.
So your folks got divorced, and then in some way through your life's work
Hmm.
found a way to come back together and spend the rest of your dad's life together.
Yeah. In part, maybe because of my work, and also just because their willingness to really look at who they were in their relationship and what mattered to them.
Yeah.
So it was really amazing to see. It really changed my view on what's possible in relationship. I think before then I'd had a static view where I was just like, people can't change. Because my dad's been in therapy for like his entire career and he's never changed and he's never seen anything about himself as far as I can tell. And then that happened and I was like, whoa, I have a completely new view of what's possible.
Yeah.
And now I'm married to someone where like we constantly give each other feedback and choose to change as a result of who we want to be and who each other reflects. And it's really magic.
Yeah. What do you think was your impact on from being in that type of environment growing up, where you had, the poetry and the love and the connection with your dad and also with your mom, but also witness and this like go between in conflict?
Number one, just like basically getting used to being a mediator, getting used to like trying to listen very carefully to what was happening to someone and like de escalate by reflecting them and by being with them. So I think that was really powerful for me. Um, Getting to see how destructive it could be not to talk about the dynamics that were happening.
Because they never talked about any of it.
Definitely not with us. And I don't think they had much ability to see outside of it. I think they probably tried to.
You weren't scared when they would
Oh, yeah,
argue?
I was.
You felt fear.
Yeah. I didn't feel fear that like there was going to be physical abuse, but I felt very frozen and scared. And especially like when my dad would blow up at us as well.
Would he
Um,
like throw things? Was it outward expression, like bang on walls, or
he
what did
only
it look
threw
like?
something once. He would storm around. He would yell,
Yell, cuss.
uh, occasionally cuss. Yeah. Um, Project, I'm sure, use universalizing language, like just yeah, he would kind of go from 0 to 60 very quickly. And
Quickly on a dime.
you kind of never knew what was going to set him off. It's funny, like I don't think I've ever been asked this question about how he related or asked much about that dynamic. So it's actually really, really interesting to think about, and I appreciate the questions. Yeah. And my mom probably overshared to me, especially. Like I was very much her confidant, which I think gave me a sense of kind of emotional responsibility at quite a young age. And I didn't have like a ton of responsibility outside of that. Like I was quite sheltered as a kid. I was like, we were upper middle class, like um, definitely a little bit isolated, but given all the things for a good childhood, except for social interaction, really. But that wasn't necessarily their fault. They just didn't really know how to model it because they both had very demanding careers.
And perhaps not the tools to figure out how to prioritize
Not at all. There
or
was no
to, I don't know.
It's really interesting discovering things in authentic relating, like going meta, talking about a dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my God, how much would have changed in my childhood if I'd known that existed? And also, how did my dad, as a trained psychiatrist who was in therapy with years and years of experience, like not know these incredibly basic tools? Like Freudian psychoanalysis, I'm sorry to say, is bullshit. You can't fix what is right now by looking at your childhood. Like you actually have to change your behavior. You have to understand how you are. You have to understand how your parts interact with each other, or like how your somatics are, something other than just understanding your past. So I also developed like quite a dislike of psychotherapy until recently when some of these new methodologies have become more popular.
Carl Rogers.
Yeah. Carl Rogers, yeah, I mean, that's
The
much more
human-centered approach.
like what we do, but also the rise of somatic psychology
Yeah.
and
Yep.
internal family systems and some
Yep.
of these
Well, they all go
much
really well together. I
even
love,
Gestalt. Yeah.
yeah, Fritz Perl.
Hmm.
You got this kind of like triangle of what I think is, Basil van der Kolk and what Peter, anyway, the somatic stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of those folks, which is like, yeah, what's going on in your body? What are emotions like? How are you responding to them? And what this whole thing. And then you have um mindfulness,
Hmm.
like awareness. Like
Yeah.
that's it all starts to have that awareness of what's going on in my present moment experience, which encompasses the somatic experience. And I think the third part of that triangle is that nonviolent communication, or you could bring in Gestalt or Fritz Perl or that human-centered approach of like,
Hmm.
how am I expressing outwardly and internally
Yeah.
as a
Like the
result?
CBT style of
Yeah,
thing as well. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think all of those are more powerful tools than the ones that they used to use back then in like, at least in his world in like the 90s. So, yeah.
So there was these kind of arguments, and there's this kind of emotional bringing you into responsibility or giving you way more than you probably should have been exposed to at a young age,
Probably emotionally
supporting your
speaking.
mom,
Hmm.
which that that might have felt good, like I'm being let in, but at the same time not realizing.
Yeah. It was something I could do, was trying to like be the mediator and go back and forth. Kind of like a shuttle mediator basically,
Mm-hmm.
because most of the time they weren't talking to each other after they'd had a fight. Um but in retrospect, it led me to overtake responsibility and to start believing that feeling someone else's emotions and taking on their pain was a form of solving the problem. So
Yeah.
that's been a really hard thing to detach from in my life.
What was your brother doing while all this was going on?
He was really, really angry as a kid. He really didn't respect my dad. My brother is like quite a hands-on person, very physical. He now is like a handyman in Eureka Springs and runs a farm in Arkansas.
Hmm.
Um, and very practical. And my dad was extremely a man of the mind, and he was like kind of brittle. Like he only knew how to enforce discipline in a very like unilateral and like not always consistent way. And my brother, I think, really didn't respect him and really didn't feel like there was anyone like teaching him how to be a man or anyone he could push back against. So he became quite angry, started having a lot of behavioral problems, was taking it out partly on me. And my parents, in what I think was a very wise move, offered him the chance to go to boarding school, and he leapt at it. And so he was in boarding school for most of my life growing up. He came home on the weekends at first, and then after a while, just only came home on holidays. So he and I didn't really have a relationship, which there's some funny stories about how that transformed. But in the last couple years, we've built more. But there was a good 10 years or so where we really didn't talk.
Really?
Hmm. Yeah, he was very much a stranger to me.
Wow.
So in a lot of ways, I felt like I was an only child.
Because he was gone. He was at boarding school and came back.
Yeah. I don't even remember much about him coming back when I was young, because I think by the time I was kind of old enough to be forming my own social relationships, he was coming back so infrequently.
So y'all never played together or any of that sort of stuff. Like, were you
Not
your
since we were
siblings playing together?
not since we were little kids.
There is a question around social and emotional learning and like as you were growing up, it sounds like with your mom you were getting some social vernacular as she's sharing her experience with you, and with your dad probably not so much.
Hmm.
What was it like? What was social and emotional learning like in your childhood?
I don't think there was a ton from my parents. In school, I was like always in the gifted programs, but I really didn't. My friends were all in some ways mentally or physically retarded. Like I didn't know how to connect with people normally. Like at recess, I would find a tiny like crevice where the door met the wall and I would just read the entire time. Like I didn't expect to be included in games, or I would literally go down the hill and dig coal out of the ground because the school was where a coal mine used to be. Like
Hmm.
that was the level of social capacity that I had. No joke. Um, I was like teased by the other kids when I was in elementary school. I would help people with their homework, but that was like kind of about the extent. And then I would go home and like wander in the woods around the ravine and read at my house. Um, so I, when I was in middle school, my parents transferred me to this all girls private school. And that was the first time that I made friends that were like not severely retarded in some way. Not that like it's bad to be retarded. It was just like not a good way to learn social skills because they interacted very differently and were like somewhat more volatile.
Hmm.
Um, and I made some friends there, which was wonderful. Like learned a lot about connection from them. They had their own issues with their families and gender and sexuality and such, but they were more normal for sure.
Hmm.
And when I was in my junior year of high school, I chose to go on an exchange to live in Italy. And that was probably the thing that was most socially transformative to me. That's like really where I transformed and grew up because I had way more responsibility. I wasn't as isolated. I was placed with a host family. I barely spoke Italian. Nobody around me spoke English. So I had to learn the language very quickly.
Yeah.
I was in a school that spoke no English.
Whoa.
It was intense, man. I had one semester of a college course in Italian that I'd taken under my belt. That was it. So I learned very
Sink
quickly,
or swim.
very much so. Um, and my first host family wasn't really a fit. They'd kind of taken me on when no one else could, but they didn't really have a lot of space for me. But also, my host mom tried really, really hard to welcome me. But also, it was a lot more responsibility. It was a lot more novelty than anything I'd done before. So I really had to teach myself to say yes to any social opportunity that came my way because there were so few of them.
Mm.
My class didn't really accept me or want me around. In Italy, the teachers change rooms, but the students don't. So oftentimes the students have been with each other since like elementary school, if some of them have stayed in the class with each other. So it's like they have very clear social bonds, and there is not room for someone else coming in, really,
Really?
at least in that grade level that I was in. So
What grade was it?
I was a junior, so it was like third year for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did end up finding a karate class that I took, and I made some friends there. So I eventually started making social connections. I eventually got transferred to a host family that kind of had more space for me. But it forced me to grow up and to start. I had like a couple mantras when I was there. I was like, say yes to everything. And the other was, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just different. Taught me a lot about cultural difference. So I got really lucky with that experience. I don't know who I would have been without it.
When you say it was hard, is it that isolation again? The lack of social like opportunity?
Lack of social contact, lack of ability even to communicate in the short term, feeling very awkward. Like the first time I had to try to explain in Italian to my host mom that I was having a period. Like the time
Just like,
yeah, exactly. I was like, how do I don't know the word for blood. I don't know the word for like, what do I, moon,
yeah, yeah,
time, month. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
about as close as I got. It took me like 5 minutes to make her understand. There was the time that I like, didn't quite understand the direction of the cheek kissing thing. First time I met my Italian grandparents in that family, I went left, my grandma went right, kissed right on the mouth, spent 2 hours unable to communicate with each other. Like things like that. And I was like very awkward and uncomfortable. So I just had to like learn to adapt, really. Um,
Did you?
I did. Definitely it caused me to grow up in a lot of ways. And I also was undiagnosed bipolar for most of my life. And I think that probably had a huge impact on me. Like I went through swings of pretty intense depression. I'm not like bipolar 1 or anything. Like it's not so bad that I have periods of blacking out, but like there's a lot of emotional swings. And that was only diagnosed a couple years ago, and I got medicated, which changed my life. So I would get really, really depressed. And that had a big impact of like, I would have hard time like mustering the energy to do anything. Um, and that, and it was hard that first half year in Italy, especially because I'd been so sheltered and had my needs provided for and been so close to my parents. Like my mom and I were best friends in a way. And so I really struggled. And then when I came home, my mom got a job in Houston and she moved down there while my dad stayed with me for my senior year. And my dad and I did not get along. So we had this terrible time with each other. And my dad was very authoritarian, and I was coming back from an experience where I'd had a lot of freedom by necessity, and
Yeah.
Italian kids are given more freedom. So that was awful. My friends had all moved on to other things, were not really available anymore. Were having their own troubles. And I like one of the ways I acted out was I semi-intentionally screwed up all of my college entrance essays. And so I ended up at the school that my parents had forced me to apply to, which was UT Austin, because my mom knew she could get me in because she worked within the system. It was supposed to be a fallback. I was not supposed to stay in Austin. I was supposed to go to a tiny liberal arts college in the Northeast. It's where everyone from my school went.
Yeah.
But when I got to Austin, it was the first time I'd really been socially exposed and free. And I was like, oh my God, there's a whole world out there. And it just opened me to a lot of possibility. And so I ended up staying.
That's where you started all this,
Mhm.
all the stuff that you got into was here in Austin.
Yeah.
What'd you study?
I became a humanities major. I was in the honors program, and I took in the humanities degree that they offer at UT Austin, you can choose your major. You can basically make one up. And if you can convince the teachers to let you into classes that seem related, you can get it. So I actually majored in intentional living communities.
Intentional co-ops.
Yeah, co-ops, communes, co-housing.
You majored in
in them.
co-ops?
I majored in co-ops. And I graduated triple honors like doing that. It was
Co-ops.
Yeah, I wrote a 250-page thesis on how to live in intentional community.
Wow.
And how to build intentional community. Yeah.
So you were studying that through through the places that you lived the whole time you were in college?
Yeah.
You were living in co-ops the whole time?
I was living in co-ops almost the whole time. Yeah.
And you loved it enough, you're like, I'm going to make this a degree.
Yeah, basically. And that's why I took a year off. I traveled around the US. I tried to make a film. Film was never finished, but the interviews that I did and the information I got from visiting those different communities, combined with me starting to study circling in Boulder during my senior year after I'd found out about authentic relating. There was no authentic relating training, so I went and studied circling. And then I used the Integral Center as a model of integral community, and I basically wrote my thesis on authentic, intentional, integral community and like what that looked like and the communication skills you needed in community. And I mapped it all to integral maps. It's still out there. It's called Building Utopia.
Wow.
It's the thesis. Yeah.
Wow. You didn't have there was no other students. You were a unique path that you paved your own path.
Yeah, I took sociology courses and psychology. I kind of bluffed my way into an advanced music composition class I should not have been in, just for fun.
That's how you shine during our musical improv thing.
I love music and musical improv. Jordan and I would get on these tears during circling immersions, where he's an incredible guitarist. I don't know if he told you.
We've played around a little bit together.
Yeah, so he would play guitar and we would improvise songs together about like basically circling each other through music in the moment. It was really fun.
That sounds cool.
My husband and I will like rewrite the lyrics to Disney songs and sing them all the time.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
So that takes us to like college and where you are now. When you graduated college, there wasn't like a career path, was there?
No. So when I graduated, what I had wanted to do was to woof, basically working on organic farms. I wanted to do that in Spain and Portugal, but I had started the authentic community in Austin my senior year, and the authentic community in Houston. For a while, I was shuttling back and forth between those, flying every month to Boulder to train and writing my thesis and attending classes. It was
How were your folks helping you pay for all that?
Um,
How are you paying for all that? That seems like a lot
my
of
parents
gas and.
had paid my way through college.
Mm-hmm.
I had like some jobs during my junior year, and then my film had gotten funded. The film that never was, but that paid for the travel, had gotten funded through Kickstarter and gotten some money from the local co-op associations. But I was very lucky. My parents have, in a lot of ways, funded me.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it would be hard to do the things that I do, at least at the price points that we try to do them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. But also we were hosting retreats and trainings at that time. Like
You were bringing in income through these retreats and trainings.
we started hosting all Texas retreats between the Houston and Austin communities,
Mm-hmm.
like only like maybe 6 months after we got started. And then
Really?
off of that, people asked for facilitator trainings. So I and my co-facilitators at the time were like, I guess let's just look at what we're doing and make up a training. And those really evolved over time. And
Yeah.
cost of living in Austin was cheaper then.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, way back when. Casa de Luz donated us the space for the first couple years we were there.
Really?
Yeah, they were great.
Yeah.
So we were really beautifully supported. I had a Patreon for many years
You did.
that helped subsidize things. Yeah. It was very much like social capital was turning into physical capital, and people were just volunteering to support. And I created a facilitator community that was as vibrant as the participant community, which I think is really what gave us a lot of our juice. We would do facilitator meetups and practice and play together and have business meetings for the community. And there was like 20 or 30 of us at various times that would all come in,
Facilitators.
have holiday parties. It was really an amazing time to be part of. There was so much energy. The retreats would happen every 3 months. The trainings would happen every 3 months. Like everyone would go through them. Everyone would try their hand at leading and getting feedback. It was like chaos some of the time, but oftentimes really beautiful. And then I was also going to Boulder every month to few months to train and then eventually to lead trainings. And that as a mothership and as a place that I got mentored was incredible. I feel so grateful for it.
For the Integral Center.
Yeah.
And you were not trying, you were building the material for a movie at the same time?
I tried. So I filmed while I was on the road. I had like 4 people that came with me to film. And we did interviews at like 30 different intentional communities all over the US. But I wasn't a filmmaker. I'd taken one liberal arts filmmaking class. I decided to do it because like there was a filmmaker in my co-op that was supposed to come with us, but he dropped out of the project super early on. And so I had this rotating string of people that like didn't really know what they were doing. And I only had bike transportation. So I got back to Austin. The only editor I could find within the budget that we still had, because almost all of our money was gone after renting the van and getting 4 people across the US, even though we were just staying at the co-ops. The only editor I could find lived 45 minutes away from me by bike, up and down tons of hills. I was trying to write my thesis, go to Boulder. Like I ended up not being able to complete the film. Also, because I was trying to create it like a research paper instead of like an actual story. So there was no through line. It was just like topic, topic, topic.
Yeah.
Which is apparently not how you create a film, as it turns out.
Maybe.
Yeah, not a good film.
Do you still have all the footage?
I still have all the footage. Someday I'd love to get it edited, but
find a way to make a story in there.
yeah, I'm sure I could now. It just hasn't been a priority.
Maybe you just need one subjective experience through one, and then you can draw in all the voices.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. It's still all there, and it was a fascinating project, and I used all of that material in my thesis, but the film never ended up happening.
Materialize. But going to the integral theory was really a powerful experience for you. You were a facilitator. You got certified as a facilitator through that experience?
I got certified in circling, yeah, through the Integral Center. There was no certification in authentic relating, so we kind of developed our own. Yeah. But I got certified as a circler through them, and then later on through Circling Europe. And then pretty quickly they started bringing me on to help assist with and then lead trainings, because Austin was the biggest community then. They were all like, what is this random thing that this girl who's like, and I was 20 when I started. So like, they were like, what is this early 20s human doing down in Texas?
That's bringing so many people together.
Yeah. and started like bringing them to the Integral Center as well, and like doing these retreats and doing these trainings that were like, didn't kind of know what to make of me, but
Did you
wanted
tap
to be
into
involved.
UT or what was it? Was it UT
It
students?
was the co-ops and it was ecstatic dance. And it was the acro yoga communities that I was part of. I was hyper social in those days. So I was going out to things all the time.
Those seem all like very fertile ground. Ecstatic dance, it seems like a perfect fit.
Yeah.
The co-ops, they already are so hyper social, probably folks that there's like a selection bias for that type of living experience that would be hyper social, I would think.
Yeah.
Right?
Some folks from the Zen Center got involved. I would like date people on OkCupid and I would invite them to games night and they would come, and then
Oh my
like
God.
we wouldn't date, but they'd stay part of the community. Everyone was inviting their partners. Everyone new to Austin. It was like, where should I go to meet people? Oh, go to games night. We had a really good way of doing it where ecstatic dance would be in the morning, and then in the evening on Sundays we would run games nights so people could just spend their whole day connecting with people. I'd do an announcement at ecstatic dance. I'd like roll to the middle of the room and I'd be like, if you want to learn to connect with your words like you connect with your body, come to games
Was this
night.
when it was out at 183 at the?
Oh, this was before then even. This
Okay.
was it was on the east side. Like what was then far east side but is not now. I'm forgetting the name of the place, but they were there for many years. Yeah,
Yeah.
this was,
That's
like
cool.
12 years ago.
That's really cool.
Acro yoga was still at the Palmer Events Center on a bunch of mats outside, a smallish community. I actually met my husband back then at a circus meetup where I was doing acro yoga and he was spitting fire.
Like you, I had a difficult childhood. Well, you didn't say you had a difficult childhood, but or did you might have? I assumed
Okay.
I had a difficult childhood with a stepdad that sounded a lot like your dad. That would kind of was not prepared for all of the sounds and the vibrance and the energy of kids. Or a kid like me, I had a lot of energy and a lot of excitement and a lot of like movement and noise making. And he had a temper that would just be like hair trigger, and you wouldn't know when it would happen. So there was this almost eggshelly all the time, a lot of fear. And when it came to parenting, I didn't have any of the skills. And I think for a long time, I parented in a way that wasn't great for the kids or for me. And that was one of the impetus for all of the self-reflection and study and all of this. It wasn't just for making me better relating, it was to make me a better parent so I could give them a better environment. Because goodness, like it took a while for me to realize that my role models had taught me the wrong way to live. It was like, not, hey, this is the way you live your life. It's like, no, these are all the ways that you don't live your life. These are all the ways that you don't influence people. And then when you're given all the wrong ways, you have to kind of seek out the right ways. It's not apparent.
Yeah. It's fun to know
Pun
where it came
intended.
from.
It's not apparent. What did you say?
It makes more sense now why you went on that journey. Like I feel like having kids is a wonderful impetus for, okay, I have to get better, but I can also see it in your speech, and then I can see it in your kids. Like Eve being willing to express her own needs is a big thing, and
Yeah.
trusting you with them.
Yeah. Has some of the same traits as I have, some of this neurodivergent stuff. I think both my kids have it a little bit. This stuff's kind of genetic.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so.
I wonder what we want to explore. We're kind of at the end of this.
Yeah.
My daughter has brought to my attention that time has flown.
Rung the bell.
Is there anything we want to talk about in closing?
What was a highlight for you of this interview?
Oh my goodness. I think I had a view of you that was totally different than you.
What was your view?
Oh man, now we're doing authentic relating games. You like got me there. That's a good question. Let's see.
I like knowing. It's like good reflection.
What did I have to go on? I didn't have a lot to go on. except for like some pictures and, stories of authentic relating, because I'd never been in community with you or in any of the groups with you. Um, what had I built up in my mind? I'm either I'm either like blanking out because I'm embarrassed, or I didn't have one, but I know that you're different than what I had kind of expected. But if I
There's some
expected
like
something, I would have expectations. I
are there
would
like
have
some
them.
attributes you thought I had?
Not really attributes, because I'd seen pictures of you. You look
Mhm.
like the pictures. Maybe I thought you'd be taller.
The one thing you can't tell from pictures.
Or maybe I thought you'd be like, there's like I didn't know you were as focused and clear. I guess maybe I thought there'd be a more bubbly or more like, I don't know, it's hard for me to pinpoint it. And I also don't want to hurt any feelings, because neither of them are good or bad. No, I love this.
Yeah, I'm super good at taking feedback, so it's very likely you'll offend me, and I'll try to tell you if you do.
But it's like, it's not feedback. It's just, so
A
maybe I
reflection.
thought being a facilitator, there'd be like a more like big or more expressive
Mm.
way. And you have a real like calm, it's not as expressive. Maybe I thought you'd be more expressive,
Yeah, I've
but
gotten the feedback.
you like have little eruptions of it.
Uh-huh.
And I really like those.
I've gotten the feedback that I'm pretty composed. In front of a room, I can definitely like put more energy on and be playful,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's part of the like valuing intellect.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That makes sense.
which sometimes is a plus. It like allows me to like do something different than a lot of other facilitators, because it's like even within the authentic relating field, I can be very clear and make lots of models and distinctions, but it has its downsides. It's like not always as charismatic.
Mm.
So I like the reflection. I appreciate it.
Then I didn't know how this was gonna go. I don't ever, like I told you, you were like, I kind of maybe want to plan, and I was like, well, I think I think I had this thought of what to share back when you said that, and what I didn't say to you was, I think that the way you've lived your life every day until we meet has been all the planning you need to have a conversation with me. I mean,
Mm.
that's really what I'm wanting. Um, but the way this is unfolded, from every aspect of it, from the games that you invited and we played, we got that new. I've never done an improv music game with anybody. And so we kind of broke free from some of the games that I always offer, and I'll
Uh-huh.
probably offer those games now. The
Good.
color game where we try
Uh-huh.
to say the color at the same time, I'll offer that one. That's a good game. And then, you know, I loved how effortless conversing was. It seemed to be really easy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
me
and
too.
time flew by. What about you?
I loved too how much it felt like a conversation and finding connections and just like I don't know. I didn't feel awkward at all. Like we could have been talking at a coffee shop. I would have definitely asked you more questions about you in that case, but there was just a lot of like moments of connection and even things I want to follow up on with you. Um I felt really I felt touched by like the intentionality in what you were asking and like the degree of curiosity, and it was really insightful in that last piece, just being able to being invited to consider some things that I hadn't. Um, like the questions you were asking about my childhood, I was like, wow, like I get asked about my backstory often on podcasts, but I never get asked to really think about what that was like and the ways it affected me. So it felt really touching to get to explore a lot of new things in this. I wasn't really regurgitating things I'd said before.
Which is one of the rituals of someone that's gonna be an authentic relator. Wasn't that the
Uh-huh.
first ritual?
Yeah.
We did it.
I always like, say it slightly differently each time, but if you get the same question each time, it like becomes hard to like really access something new. And I felt like you invited me to access new parts of me.
Oh, that's cool. That feels
Mhm.
good to hear. Yeah. I hadn't watched all the podcasts, so I didn't know. You could have been saying all the same stuff, and I would have never known.
Nope. No, I think this was all new, really. I can't think of many things I'd really said before.
All new
Just
stuff.
fun, yeah.
Well, I'll definitely invite you back to continue this conversation in one way, shape, or form.
I'd love that.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Yeah, I really appreciate your interviewing.
Yeah. I like to end with a hug, but not everybody's a hugger, so
I am definitely a hugger.
okay, well,
I will cuddle pile you.
could we end
Yeah,
with a hug?
I'd love to
You
end with a
just
hug.
swivel this thing around.